Hello and welcome to the Chickadee Knitting Club Knitting Podcast. My name is Caitlin, and in this little video that you're about to watch here, I'm going to take you on a little journey with me as I explore the town that I'm staying in right now. I'll be sharing some of the stuff that's been going on in my life lately, and of course, I'll be showing you what I've been knitting. So get comfy. I am going to get myself ready for the day, and then we'll see what this little town holds. Before I hit the road, I kind of want to share what I'm wearing today. From the waist down, I sort of feel like Lucy Pevensey. I have thrifted shoes and socks, and a skirt that my sister sewed for me. And then what you can see here is another thrifted item, this turtleneck. I've had this cardigan for years. This pin is a true Narnia reference. It is Aslan's instructions to the very first kings and queens of Narnia, made by the Clever Clove. I have earrings made by a friend of a friend on Instagram, Homebody Beads, and then this hat is my own creation. As you can see, it is beautiful out there, and I want to soak in every second of it, so let's go. So right now I think that I'm going to feed two birds with one scone, as they say, and work on my current work in progress while I tell you kind of what I've been up to. First of all, as you can see, I'm in a very different location. This is not my bedroom back in my apartment back in OT school. First of all, I finished up my didactic coursework for occupational therapy school, which is just a fancy way of saying that my book learning is done, and now it's time to get in the field. Which I also think was a kind of confusing way of saying that I am on my clinical rotation right now. The way that occupational therapy school works is that you have a few years where it's like traditional college. You go and study with your professors and your classmates. And once you've done all that, then it's time to take what you've learned into the actual field of occupational therapy underneath the guidance of an experienced occupational therapist. And from all the OTs that I've talked to, that is the best way to learn how to be an OT. And while I was in OT school, I was a part of this rural internship scholar program kind of thing. Basically, it prepared healthcare professionals, future healthcare professionals, to be equipped to work in a rural setting. I do have an interest in potentially working in a rural setting. I think that just the pace of life is nice and something that I kind of want in my future. But also I wanted to have that hands-on experience to be able to do more with less. So being able to really have my foundational field work experience in a place that might not have the same sort of resources as like a fancy hospital or a 5-star skilled nursing facility, I feel will be really good to help me no matter where I end up. And here I am. There's not a lot of rush. There's not a lot of anonymity in the same way as you would have it in a big city. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone is so willing to go out of their way to support anybody who needs it within the community here. And I really appreciate that. And I'm really glad that I'm able to experience that firsthand, even if just for a little bit while I'm up here for 12 weeks. But before my rotation started, I had about a month off in between when my school ended and when my rotation began. So I went back home, got to see my family, got to see our dog, and got to move my little brother into college. That was really exciting. I'm so happy that I got to be a part of that, which involved a road trip to his university. And after that, we went on a road trip back to the state that I had my rotation in. We traveled down through the Midwest, through Missouri and Kentucky, into West Virginia, stopping along at many wonderful places along the way. We spent the night in vineyards and even once at an alpaca farm. That was pretty incredible. Naturally, the alpacas were tended for their wool, and we weren't about to leave without getting a few skeins of it. They even sold these adorable alpaca stitch markers, one of which I am using to mark the decrease rows on my current little project here. And after that, we visited Washington, D.C. for a day, and then I hopped on a plane and headed to my rotation. My clinical instructor, who's the OT who's showing me the ropes, is working all over the hospital, and so I get to see literally everything that occupational therapists do. I'm already a month into my clinical rotation, and it really feels like it's just flying by. So that's kind of my life right now. And with that, let's get into the knitting. In true Caitlin fashion, I filmed a whole half-hour podcast episode, but because I was in OT school, I didn't have the time to edit it right away, and by the time I had time to edit it, I had filmed it in July, and it was almost September, and so it felt a little outdated, and the kind of things that I had knit and was sharing really weren't big projects that I felt super stoked about, except for one, and I will share that one here. So this past summer, towards the beginning of my summer semester, I finished my very first sweater. I have a storied past with sweaters, and I could go into so much detail, but I'll just be brief and say I have been attempting to knit sweaters for literally years, sometimes spending years on a single sweater that never sees the light of day. Speaking of light, I am really sick of this. So you can imagine my utmost delight when I finally find a sweater pattern that is smooth and just flies off the needles and makes sense, and that I actually finished, and it's something that I would actually wear. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to this little number right here. It is the Feel the Burn sweater by Boyland Knitworks. It was a free pattern. I knit it in Cloudborn Alpaca in 4 different shades of brown, as you can see. It is somewhat of a cropped sweater, mostly just because I only had so much yarn and I really wanted to finish my sweater. I wasn't willing to wait to order more yarn online and wait for it to ship. But it sort of ends where I naturally like to tuck in my shirts, so it works great. It's called the Feel the Burn sweater because the design of it, the colorwork pattern within it, is based off of the mittens that Bernie Sanders wore at the most recent American presidential inauguration, which, aside from the Pledge of Allegiance being led in American Sign Language, was by far my favorite thing about the whole day. mostly because of the memes that came out, but more so because friends of mine and people who I hadn't really talked to a lot, but who knew that I knit, were sending me all these pictures, and there was this huge surge of joy and recognition for the fiberwork community, and people who like knit and weave and crochet and spin yarn and all that sort of stuff. It was a good time, and it was really fun to see people loving knitting the way that I do. This was such a satisfying project to knit, partially because it was just fun and easy, a lot easier than I had expected, and also because finishing it and wearing it out into the world felt like such a huge accomplishment. My current big work in progress is something that I have been knitting for a very long time. It is something that I mentioned in a few previous episodes from about last year around this time, that I had taken off the needles so I could use those needles in another project, and then I never put it back on the needles. I had to actually go and buy a new set of needles in that size so that I wouldn't have an excuse not to work on this. And it is my Botanical lace wrap from the pattern by Purl Soho. It is pretty long. I am pretty proud of it, especially because the last time I had it on my podcast, it was about half the length of this, if even that. And I still have just a little bit of yarn left to go. I don't remember what yarn this is, but I will put it in the description with everything else that I put there. And I am just going to knit until the yarn runs out, and that will be my Botanical lace wrap. My goal last autumn was to finish it before the snow melted in the following spring, and that clearly did not happen, but that's okay. And so I've just revived that goal, and hopefully I'll finish it before the snow melts this year. The thing that I love most about this pattern is that it looks like a very, very complicated lace stitch, but it's not. The stitch is actually pretty easy to memorize, which is a good thing, because there's a lot of moving parts to it. So it's not something that you want to like lug around the chart and be constantly trying to like read every single line. But because there is so much repetition, it looks like you have to memorize like 36 different steps, when in fact it's more like 4 or something like that. The fabric itself is pretty easy to read as well. And also it hides mistakes very nicely, and it's been kind of flying off my needles. But unfortunately, I've had to set it down for a little bit, hopefully not for another year, because I wanted to knit something up really quick for a OT at the hospital that is having her baby shower today, and who I'd like to just kind of share my knitting with. So the little project that you saw me working on as I was talking about my life updates is a pair of baby leggings. I'm using a free pattern that I can't think of the name of off the top of my head, that is meant to have like a sort of like crisscross, sort of false cable effect to it, but I knew that if I wanted to finish these before my rotation ends, or before the baby is born, whichever comes first, I knew that I probably wouldn't have time for the kind of fiddly bits. And while to me this looks very plain and not nearly as interesting as it's supposed to be, the nice thing about knitting and about a lot of people not knowing how to knit is that just something basic like this is already very impressive. And the thing about knitting things for babies is that there is just that general understanding that it will not fit who you're knitting it for forever. And it's better to err on the side of too big than too small, because there's always more room to grow. But I've really been enjoying this, partially because it's so easy since it's just stocking net compared to the complicated 36 step lace that I had been working on, and also because I really love the color here. Because I've closed the blind, the lighting doesn't show it really for what it truly is, but it is a Plymouth Encore yarn in the color 241. It has a lot of lighter shades kind of woven into the yarn itself, so it sort of has that like heathery look to it without it being an overwhelming pink. If I knit this up faster than I expect it to go, I might just knit her a matching either headband or pair of fingerless mitts or what have you, because this is just such a fun yarn to work with. And why just stop at baby leggings? Why not give her more? The more the merrier. And that's everything that I really wanted to say and to share. Thank you so much for watching and listening and being interested in the things that I'm knitting. I would love to hear what you're knitting right now in the comments. And until next time, just as it says on the packaging of the alpaca yarn that I used for this sweater, may you have a little bliss in every stitch. I'll see you soon.